DC Public Charter School Board presents Uncharted Territory with your host, Dr. Michelle Walker Davis.
Today, I'm joined by two leaders whose schools are living proof that staying nimble isn't optional. It's essential to meeting the moment for students and families. I will introduce them now. My first guest leads a school that was just renewed to operate for another 15 years. I've seen what they are building firsthand, and it is exciting to watch. Dr. Marco Clark, an HBCU grad, is the founder and leader of Richard Wright Public Charter School for Journalism and Media Arts. Through programs like Man the Block and Master P's Masterclass, Richard Wright has made a commitment that their responsibility to students extends beyond academics and the school day. Dr. Clark, thank you for being here. My second guest is Myron Long, who is also an HBCU grad, and he is the founder of the Social Justice School. Through initiatives like Guaranteed Together, his work reflects a deep commitment to social justice and ensuring his school fully serves and supports every student. Welcome to Uncharted Territory.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much for being here. I can't wait to get into this conversation because I know you have a lot to offer. So both of you went through the process of starting a new school, and you wanted to design something different from the experiences that you had, and you wanted to bring that to the students. So I want to ask you to talk a little bit about what it was like to create a space that was different, a space that challenged the norms of school and education. And in particular, Myron, you started this school in the pandemic. So as you open the doors to your school, tell me a little bit about what you had to navigate, each of you. How did you think about what you wanted to design? And when you confronted the realities of students in the doors, families that you're navigating, what did you have to give up? What did you have to trade to get to the vision that you had for students and families?
Wow. So I can tell you it was a hard road, right? To know that we were trying something new, that we wanted to create journalists that were in the District of Columbia, right? A dying breed, a profession that folks were not jumping into. At that time, understanding how we're going to get kids that were urban America to want to become journalists, because there's a lot of work that was involved with that. And so I started with this idea that we knew that we would attract kids. Typically, I would attract kids from the lowest socioeconomic areas of the district, that I thought that we would bring them in and that they would be behind in reading and math. And so one of the things I said, well, how do I create journalists? They got to know how to do research. They got to be able to read. And my thought was that if we could improve reading, then their writing skills would improve. And if we can improve reading and writing, then they would develop a voice. And that voice would start to become small journalists in their community. And we would start to go back in the community and start to change one person at a time. It was difficult knowing that I was starting out with zero budget, $0, no big funders behind me, just an idea and a dream. And so with that I was like, what do we do to get it done? And we share the same sentiments because we were trying to figure out how to make this happen. Yeah. I found myself recruiting kids, walking in neighborhoods that was uncharted territory, and trying to figure out how to have a conversation about what the community wanted and how I could entice kids to become journalists. At that time, in 2009, the internet was just starting to pop. And so we were looking at how kids would become media literate, that they would be able to utilize YouTube and other facets to be educated, to tell a story and to tell a truthful story about the 90% of young people who really wanted to do well and those that had aspirations of being amazing. And so that journey started how we started to live with Richard Wright. The other thing is that I went to Boston to study at the Boston Latin School because every school was offering French and Spanish. But I realized that if our kids could learn Latin as a foreign language, then we could start to begin to develop that vocabulary skill that would help them as they became journalists.
Yeah. But say a little bit more about why journalism. You could have started a school that focused on anything. Why journalism?
I wanted journalism because just imagine I had watched students go up on the hill, and I wanted our kids to know that they belong in the room. I could imagine these kids in shirt and ties asking the tough questions, the questions that our leaders could not get around because they could never get away from talking to children.
That's right.
And so
Keeps you honest.
I recognize that if I had those students there and they were intelligent enough that they did their homework, they could really get to the nitty gritty of everything, tell the truth about what was really happening, and spread that in the communities that needed information. And that would happen, and it would be done in a very, very smart way. And the students would be viewed not by the 10% that the news was talking about, because every time something negative happened, they show 10% of them on the news, and not the 90% that's in school 12 hours a day.
Yeah. I'm hearing a social justice theme in what you said, so I'm going to turn to you, Myron. You started a school focused on social justice. Why social justice? And tell me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I think we were kind of thrust into this brand new educational ecosystem that happens during the pandemic. So the world stops. We get our charter approved. We're like, hey, join this new school. So we have to first get families to trust us, and then trust us to have them, keep them safe and their kids like literally alive, not just like metaphorically alive. But I think our journey actually comes a little bit before then, where we have this phrase that we use at Social Justice School, where we build with the community and not for them. And so I think as a native Washingtonian, I had to humble myself, because the reality is that I went to school here. I love this city. Social Justice School is a love letter to DC. But when I was in school, that was 20 plus years ago. And I can't assume that the same needs that I had when I was a middle school student are the same needs that our students had. And so what we did in the design of our model is that we did these, what we call empathy interviews. And we would ask kids, like, what does school look like in Wakanda? Because we wanted them to explore like this kind of like revolutionary, radical experience that didn't exist yet. That was the first Wakanda, not the second one, or the third one, hopefully.
That was a little different.
That was a little different, right. And so we wanted to hear from them, and we took that feedback, and every time we got feedback, we would kind of like add that into our instructional model until what we started for Social Justice School.
Yeah. I want to build on that theme about listening to students. It's something that I hear both of you say a lot, and it's something that I've experienced you both do in your school community. So talk to me about what you've learned from your students and what you had to change along the way. I think your experience is a little bit different, Myron, because I would imagine you were changing every year that since you opened. You've had a little bit longer with your journey, Dr. Clark, but say a little bit about what you learned from your students. What are some of the decisions that you had to make in terms of how to make your school more responsive? Is there programming happening now that you didn't think you needed at the beginning of the journey? Say a little bit about what your students and families are teaching you or have taught you.
You know, I learned a lot about mental health and wellness as we moved through. There were so many different things that, as I raised the bar academically and raised the bar of expectations with the families and the children, I recognized that we had to create a level of mental health and wellness that would work with our students. In order to be able to put them into this journalist role, we had to get their mental capacity together. I had to make sure that they were able to operate in places that they would make them nervous, but be able to also share what they thought about their experiences. Their experiences made a difference in the way that they would articulate, the way that they would assimilate as they moved into a room, and how they would actually become change agents. And so throughout that, we've ensured that we had student voice in basically every decision that we've made as we continue to build throughout the years. What do you think about having gym class with no gym, right? How do you operate in a building where lunches are brought in and there's 4 or 5 different lunch shifts because you have a small cafeteria because we're in a commercial site rather than a traditional school. So their voices have helped determine how we roadmap and how strategically we are with moving kids forward.
Yeah. Anything you wanted to add there?
Definitely. I think I'll talk a little bit about like pre-opening and then like when we actually opened. So our co-founder and I, as a part of our design process, we call ourselves like serial piloters. We're like, we will pilot until there can be no more pilots. And our longest pilot was several years ago, called the Freedom Academy, and it was a 1 month version of what would become Social Justice School. And there was a moment that we call this our dodgeball moment. So one day, it's me and our co-founder Brandon. I joke with him to this day. I don't know how I ended up with 25 kids by myself. I mean, but I'm a teacher at heart, so I'm like, let's get it in. We're gonna do this math in this ELA. And one of our students, Zion, our former student, she's now in college. She was like, "Can we just play dodgeball?" And I'm like, I don't know if dodgeball is like rooted in equity, because if you're taller, you might, So I was like, "Could you give me like a 3-page essay with like some research on dodgeball?" And she was like, "No, Mr. Long, we just really want to play dodgeball." And I was like, why are they so obsessed with this dodgeball? Like, I just don't get it. Mm-hmm. And I think what we learned in that moment, that like deconstructing the world for kids, Black and brown kids in particular, it's heavy and it can be emotionally and draining. And what they really wanted to experience more is this notion around play. And we realized that like play and designing for Black and brown children is an act of resistance and joy. Wow. And so if you come into our school, you'll see less of the like, let's break down all of the isms, and more of the like, let's get young people's voice and trying to design what this new world will look like.
Yeah. You're making me want to go in so many different directions. So, Dr. Clark, you still today talk about your efforts around Man the Block and what led to what we now know as Safe Passage. And Myron, you have the Guaranteed Together program. Both of these are programs unto themselves outside of school, but I think it speaks to what both of you personify in terms of the wraparound and whole student approach that you have. So could you say more about how you approach the day, your school community, that your day doesn't just start at 8 or 9 or 7, whatever middle secondary school is, and it doesn't end at 3 or 4. I've heard both of you articulate this, and I see it in your school community, that it's all of that. It's the academics, it's the extracurricular, it's the social emotional. In your instance, it's the socioeconomic, Myron. So could you say more about how critical other things besides academics are to your approach to schooling?
One of the things that happens, that we have one of the lowest truancy rates in the district, and part of it is that our students feel safe getting to school, to and from. They love to see our staff out there. They know that when they come up from the subway and they hit that platform, someone that they're familiar with is going to be there. Mm-hmm. So if there's someone lurking around, they know that they always have someone that's there that they could call for support. I think that the Safe Passage became something that we metastasized throughout the city, because we recognized that our kids that were trying to reach that 90%, that was trying to reach their aspirations, were being followed or stifled by the other 10%. And so we had to do something. But I wanted Safe Passage to not become a situation, that's why we called it Man the Block, is that we wanted to become a cheering squad more than someone that's just there to break up a situation. So you create a positivity level that everyone's cheering you on. So you, instead of walking with one person, you can now have 10 fans that are securing that. How was school today when you walk out? Adults that you don't even know that's cheering for you. So we wanted a cheering squad throughout the city that would actually make things happen for every kid in the district, and not just those at Richard Wright. And so we're excited that has taken off the way it needed to.
I like that.
I think for us, when we were designing our models, we looked to Ella Baker's Freedom Schools also as an example of like the tradition of Black pedagogy as liberatory. And so I think when we think about those schools in the South, it was rooted in folks' lived experiences, and then the community kind of being able to drive the school, and the school responding to the community. And so when we started, we wanted to be a school that walked with our students and families side by side. And in order to do that, you had to first found like really deep connections and relationships with our families. And so we've seen over the past several years that our scholar activists have really gotten into this notion around like designing. Like they advocated for a new school lunch. It took them a while because the arc of moral justice sometimes goes a little slow, but they finally got a new vendor and they are really excited about it. And I think that we were trying to unpack, like, our parents are really engaged, but they didn't do a lot of the design work, and we're trying to figure out why. So we, again, in our commitment to empathy and to empathy interviews, we began to talk to kids, talk to families, and what we heard from them is that in order to dream this new world, it supposes that you can eat, right? Because you can't dream about what the future is if you're not meeting your basic needs.
Yeah.
And so our kids were like, okay, DC has one of the highest child poverty rates. I think it was 1 in 4 a few years ago. It might even be like a little bit more than that now. And so we were trying to unpack that with students and to have them grapple with that, because that's preventing them from being able to eat. And so we were like, if you had a magic wand, how would you eradicate child poverty? And they were like, we just give families more money. And I was like, that is the simple yet profound and true answer that we've actually seen. And so we had Councilman Parker at the time come and talk to our kids about the baby bond, the child tax credit that he was trying to get passed through legislation, which finally did. Hope it still exists in the mayor's budget. Shout out to the mayor's. Yep. And we were like, that would be great. We're a really small school, but I don't know if we can do that. And so thankfully, we were able to partner with an organization called Mothers Outreach Network to launch the first ever guaranteed income model and initiative in a public charter school or school period in DC. So our first pilot, we had 15 families. Households received about $300 per month, and students ended up getting about $100 per month. It was unrestricted. We did not track their spending. A part of that was intentional because there's a narrative that folks who experience poverty will buy like Jordans, and they did not, of course. And it had this really small but powerful impact. So those students in our first pilot had slightly stronger attendance rates as well. And then we launched a second pilot. And now we have 40 families. The adults receive $300 per month, and students receive $100 per month. And again, it's unrestricted. We're not tracking their packages or anything like that, but they're spending it on everyday household needs. Like we had families be able to say, I took me and my child on a vacation for the first time in like our lives, right? Like, and I think that there's something about emotional wellness and hope that when folks feel like they can breathe, that just allows parents to be better parents, to be more engaged, and connect with the school in a deeper way.
Yeah, again, hearing the themes of the whole student, academic, social, emotional, financial, all of that. I want to go back again to your school design. So it's not lost on me that you both started secondary schools, one with a unique grade configuration, a standalone middle school. Why secondary schools? Students have already had formative experiences, hopefully positive, but sometimes negative by the time they show up at your door. What was so important to you about the secondary school?
Well, I just looked through the lens of who I was as a student. I wasn't the greatest student in secondary level. I also looked at that was a group where people really kind of cast off and decided, well, we'll do everything from K to 8 or K to 6. So what about the other kids that are about to go in the world and make things happen? I wanted to make sure that we would be a savior there to kind of work with those students that otherwise would turn into a tragic end. And so the great Marva Collins, who also graduated from HBCU, started a school. She took on a group of people that students that no one really wanted to work with, and transitioned Chicago public schools into a different territory because of the work that she took on with a group of individuals that had been written off. And so when looking at the secondary level, we had to put something in place. And so one of the things I was out approving was with a colleague is that we were proving that there were more kids in college than there were in jail. And so part of that study also went into looking at how you get to the secondary level to get them in college and track them to make sure that they become future leaders. That was one of the missions that I had, and I recognized that some of the students that we would attract had 8 years or 7 years of education that needed to be refined before they stepped into the world. Because who was going to lead us and be the change agents for humanity if we didn't save them before they jumped off the cliff.
Definitely. I think for me, I am one of the few rare educators that I think is obsessed with the middle school brain.
You are rare.
This is 20 plus. I stopped counting in middle school. And I think the middle school brain gets like this kind of bad rap because, they have all these like signs and they're crazy and they're very emotional, which they are. I love them, but they are extremely emotional. But there's something about the middle school brain that you're starting to develop cognitively is this notion around fairness. And so our theory of change is like, if they can take away this individualistic notion of like fair, that's not fair. They said this, you didn't see them. That's not fair. I'm gonna advocate for me, me, me. What if we could flip that into the world and they can be advocates for fairness and justice about others? And so I think for us, like when we looked at cognitive development, like that middle school brain was very, very ripe for that kind of transition. And then also when we look at the civil rights movement and some of the Black Power movements, it's often like, yes, college students, but also like middle school students who are getting ready to put their lives on the line for freedom and justice as well.
I'm living some of that middle school a sense of fairness. I have a middle schooler at home, so I can totally relate, but really appreciate you making the connection to giving them a space to turn that outward instead of inward. I'm going to go back to your favorite topic, COVID years. Every educator loves to talk about the COVID years. Want to hear a little bit more about what you learned during that time, what specific adjustments you've made to your programming. How have you shifted just the way you do things fundamentally, even though thankfully we're out of those crisis years? And I'm going to throw into that our new friend AI, because that has emerged in this time as well. How are you navigating those two big experiences and big, I would say, moments in education?
Well, I'll tell you, what we have in common is that he started during the pandemic, and we moved into a new facility in the middle of the pandemic, and had to move a entire student body over and build in the middle of the pandemic. And so, number one, I'm sure we both shared that we were nervous and really afraid of overstretch and worrying about how you're going to pull your community together. Particularly me, I was concerned about how you keep the culture together that's linked with academics, because the culture of our organization was very important to what we do. And what I learned is that we also got to see deficits in kids academically that it caused us to measure a lot harder. We recognized the number of wraparound services that needed to happen, not just for the kids, but for the families that had to go deeper. We do a lot of home visits, but we wind up continuing doing those home visits, not just to the students, but to parents, because we connected with them and we found, hundreds of stories from parents that we would go see the kid and then wind up, providing counsel to the parents. And so that didn't stop because we recognized that was something that needed to continue on. And it's a part of our program now. The actual being alert with our students and available for them around the clock, meaning academically, if a kid needs to tap into you after hours, we made that available for our staff, our teachers, to do that, because we saw the need during the pandemic and how that deepened some. So we made that a part of our overall program. And we also looked at how, what the small things matter, and really asking deeper questions to students about what do you need, not just for academics, but as a person to be able to survive, because that's what's going to bring you in to open your mind and want you to learn more.
Definitely. I think that was a wild start. Would never, ever recommend anyone starting a school in a pandemic.
Hopefully we don't have to navigate a pandemic again.
But it was also like a very intense time for me and our co-founder personally as well. And so I had my first daughter. Shout out to my daughter, Honor. I always bring them in the room during that time period when we first opened. My mom had just transitioned to be on the ancestral plane, and our co-founder wife had a stroke after giving birth to her second child.
Oh my goodness.
But perfectly, they made it through and they were healed. And so I think because of that, we really had to focus on the human aspect first as we were designing our school. And so we wanted to make sure that families felt seen, they felt known, and they felt cared for and academically challenged. And so I think for us, as a very small school, we really had to be intentional about our resources to be like, if families need to get to work and they're afraid, we got to send them Uber cards. Our accounting team, they're amazing. Shout out to our finance team. They didn't always love that. They don't love a lot of Ubers and Uber Eats and things of that nature. But we had to do it because we were in this time where the world was like literally crumbling and falling apart. And so to have kids and adults be in spaces where like I am afraid that I might come to school one day and then someone may not be there the next day because of COVID.
That's real.
Like that's real.
Yeah.
And so we too had to make sure that we were providing the mental health supports for our families. And I think as a school leader, I was like, I want to be able to tie the relationship directly between our finances and our commitment to social justice and love, learning, and liberation. And I think because we started in a pandemic, it gave us a real clear pathway of like what that actually meant for our students and families.
And that's something that is still core to what you're doing right now. Yeah. I heard a lot about just mission alignment and staying focused on what the main thing is, and also who you're serving, right? A real clarity of purpose around the students that come through your doors. As you give advice maybe to other school leaders who are navigating this moment, number one, how would you describe this moment where we are 30 years into charter schools in the District of Columbia, and what should school leaders be thinking about for the next, in your case, you just did 5 years the other day, you just did 15 years. So over the next few years, what should school leaders be thinking about if they too are centering the whole child and thinking about all of the ways that they stay mission aligned?
Well, I want leaders to recognize this is hard work. I think a lot of folks think that starting a charter school program is easy. You're going to get in and automatically everyone's going to love you, and the entire system and the focus is going to be there for you. It's not going to work like that. I just want to be honest. I think that you have to understand that, you know, there's a focus on children first, but also understanding that your mission and your standards and everything has to align. You have to also understand that this is a business, right? And within that business model, you have to figure out how to do all things. And so as you transition into the future and in the development of it, keep in mind that your business plan was stationary. We're impacting communities, we're impacting lives to come for years to come. And that it is in many cases, we're the last stop before they go to the real world. And so you want to ensure that you are prepared for that as you move forward into the future.
Yeah, I would add, you got to take care of yourself and be whole. The reality is that like we don't need martyrs in this work that we're doing around education reform and education change. And so I think even personally, when you give yourself so much to a school, there's always this notion of like you can't give from an empty cup. So you got to have your community, your personal crew that can pour into you so that you can continue to pour into others, because without that, the work is definitely not sustainable. I agree with Dr. Clark. I always say like we're a business that happens to be a school. Like it could be any other business, but we're a business, and that's hard because sometimes you have to, you know, do this analysis of like money and students and human talent and capital, and it's a very delicate dance that you have to do. And then I would say lastly, if you're going to ask for people to give feedback, you actually got to take the feedback. You can't just be like, oh, what do you think about this? Let me send you a little survey, and then you get the results and you're like, well, I'm not doing that anyway. This is all. I'm just doing that for like the dog and pony show. So when you get feedback, actually listen to it and name it, because people will connect with you even more on a deeper level for that.
Yeah, I would say that's particularly true with young people. Be prepared to do what,
yes.
what they tell you, what they ask for, because they will ask. Well, I am just excited to have had an opportunity to talk to both of you in this arena. We have lots of opportunities to be across the table in public board meetings and to talk specifically about like what the data say. But what I heard today is all heart, right? Yes, it is a business. Yes, you have work to do, but it is obvious that your school communities are a reflection of the intentionality in design, the purpose that you bring to this work, and the passion that you bring to this work. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to engage in this way. I want to thank you for being guest on uncharted territory, and in particular, Dr. Clark, I want to thank you for the amazing work that you're doing here that allows us to tape at the Richard Wright School. So thank you for that opportunity, and look forward to engaging in many, many ways with each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right. I need to do the... What you have shared today is exactly what this podcast was created for. 2 schools, 2 different approaches, 1 clear belief that when you design school around the real lives of students, something extraordinary becomes possible. If you're listening and this conversation has you thinking about your own school or your own leadership, that is exactly the point. Subscribe to Uncharted Territory so you never miss an episode. You can subscribe at dcpcsb.org/podcast. Follow DCPCSB on social media and share this episode with a colleague who needs to hear it. I'm Dr. Michelle Walker Davis. This is Uncharted Territory. Until next time.